Welcome to the first of our ViSafe Webinar series. Our aim today is to introduce a new approach to improving safety and reducing risk. For those of you who don't know us, we're an Australian technology company with offices in Melbourne, the US and the UK. Our focus is on wearable technology to improve health, well-being and safety. Okay, just a bit of an agenda today. We're going to run through some introductions just so that you've got a bit of background on Sarah and myself. We're going to look at the challenges in manual handling injuries, really trying to dig deep into what the challenges are and where we fit in. We're going to look at wearable technology and how it fits into OH&S. And then we're specifically going to go into ViSafe. What is it and how it has helped other companies? We've got an interview with one of our clients, Specialty Fashion Group, that we'll roll through, and you'll be able to see a real life case study of how we work and what the benefits of the technology are. Today's speakers are Landell, that's myself, and we've got Sarah Risley. Sarah, you go first.
Thanks, Landell. Yeah, Landell and I are really excited to talk to you today about ViSafe, and in particular, we had a chat to Gareth from Specialty Fashion Group, so we're looking forward to sharing that information with you. My background is I trained as an occupational therapist and I've worked in marketing for many years, specifically in the area of looking at new products and developing these to meet market needs. I've been with Dorsavi for about 4.5 years and find it a really exciting space and company to work for because we're really innovative and challenging new areas and offering great products to the market.
Yeah. My name's Landell, as I mentioned. My background is in sports science and exercise physiology. I'm based in Sydney. I've worked in corporate health and also with a lot of sporting teams, particularly in video analysis. So from where I've come from, any time that you can link objective data to video, that's really exciting. And I've only been with the company for about a year, but that's really what drives me to make the jump across to Dorsavi, and I'm loving working with the clients so far. So let's jump into what we know of the issues. What we know is that work injuries are costing $60 billion in Australia annually, that there is definitely a need for objective data to identify those issues and rank priorities. We find that businesses are really demanding proof that risk control strategies will work before they invest that money. And we're finding that compliance with manual handling training isn't very high and it's not on the workers' to-do list. Businesses need a better way to engage employees and actually change behaviour.
Yeah, and you can understand why that would be, is that traditionally manual handling training often happens in a room. You know, people once a year sit in a room and watch videos, but you really need something that's on the job with the worker, because when they're under time pressures, they're just going to be focused on getting it done. So making manual handling training I guess more exciting and more of a priority gives you the benefit of then getting some real engagement with those workers.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the data and the technology can actually help you engage those workers as well, and not just look at the costs of work injuries, but really that engagement piece. What we've done is we've interviewed one of our clients who used our service and data as part of a broader strategy to engage his workforce. So we're going to start off with hearing from Gareth from the Specialty Fashion Group about who he is and what his problem was. So here's Gareth.
So just to give you a bit of an overview of Specialty Fashion Group, so it's actually the largest specialty retailer of women's fashion in Australasia. We have 7 brands today, which is Miller's, Crossroads, Katie's, Autograph, City Chic, Rivers, and the newest addition, which is One Woman. It's an incredibly fast-paced business. There's a garment sold every second in either Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, or the US now, so we're a truly global company. We have over 1,000 stores and supported by over 5,500 team members. So like all businesses, we've basically been challenged with trying to find the solution to manual handling risk, and we spend a lot of time trying to do that. And historically, we approached it in a very similar way every time, which was store visits, interviews, risk assessments, and ultimately repeat. Throughout time, we've put in a lot of good controls that are really still pivotal today, but really we just saw that there wasn't any sort of reduction in manual handling or any significant reduction in that risk. So after 5 years of control implementation and risk mitigation, we'd become resigned to the fact that really our main way of actually reducing the risk was to tell team members over and over again how to do something. But ultimately, in the safety industry, what I believe is that we're trying to change behaviours. And telling someone over and over again how to do something really doesn't go about changing that behaviour. So the idea was really to sort of get a true understanding of the risk and then build an engagement package that we could actually put out to the stores to start to engage them and change that behaviour over time. Once we'd seen that there were some continuing issues with manual handling risk, and we'd reviewed our policies and procedures and seen that they just weren't really having the impact that we'd wanted to, we set about trying to review the problem of manual handling risk and almost focus specifically on that as a problem. So the first step was, as most safety people would do, is look back at our incidents over the 5 years and look at the trends that were actually still occurring in conjunction with our risk register. And we did have a bit of a sort of a mix between what the risk register is telling us, because we've done all of our controls, and what was actually happening in reality.
So Gareth's highlighted some really important issues, actually. I think one of the key things that stands out to me is when he says telling someone over and over how to do something isn't effective. You can see, why they weren't really seeing much change in terms of their injuries. So they were doing the right things, they were getting on site and they were assessing things, but they just weren't seeing the changes. And I think that, a lot of safety managers come to us with that frustration in that they set up their training programs. They do everything, they give the workers the information, but they don't see that translate on the job because, again, it's just not top of mind for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, he really talked about that discrepancy in data between what the risk register was showing him and what was actually happening in real life. And that's a really common problem of a lot of our clients, and somewhere that we can definitely be of service.
Yeah. And so, as he said, trying to change behaviours is the key behind actually seeing that reduction in injuries. And it lends itself quite nicely into how do wearables fit in the workplace. So a few things that are happening, I guess, and it makes it exciting, is that everyone's interested in wearables at the moment. It's hot, it's the topic. People are wearing their Fitbits or whatever it is, and people are engaged in it. So suddenly safety has this opportunity to be the hot topic in the company, where if it involves wearables, people are interested in their manual handling and people are talking about it, so it becomes a talking point. So I think it's quite exciting that we can inject through wearables a really interesting thing that engages the workforce. The other thing about wearables in the workplace is that it's rapidly developing at the moment, and it's not just areas like movement and muscle activity like what ViSafe does, but things like fatigue monitoring, proximity warning, so many different areas of the business that wearables are now infiltrating to actually protect the workers and improve safety. It's a pretty exciting space. And people like Gareth, when I first met Gareth, I thought, wow, what a great guy. He's looking really at innovative ways to challenge. So he's, wanting to challenge the way things are done. And it's really exciting when you're around people like that have that energy and passion to drive outcomes. And, the results, which we're going to hear a little bit later on in his clip, the results he's been able to achieve have been amazing, outstanding. And it's quite exciting for him because, as he said, he was trying all these things but not seeing that translate into a reduction in injuries. But now that he's integrated ViSafe and through his program that he talks about, he's really seeing the big changes. So there's a range of options. The other thing is wearables are everywhere at the moment. You've got your consumer-based products, but what is key, particularly if you're going to start using it in this sort of space and the companies are going to start making big investments, is you've got to be able to trust the data. If you start using a wearable that was developed for the consumer market that really hasn't done any validation, you can't trust that data. And if you can't trust that data, you are totally wasting your time. You don't want to invest a whole lot of your corporate dollars into something if you don't know that that is actually accurate. And I think that's one of the key distinguishing features of what Dorsey and ViSafe is all about. The company's actually, for many years, been developing this product and undertaking research and going through validation and getting regulatory approval so that we are a medical grade wearable, and that when we're reporting on something, you can trust that data.
Yeah, I think it's really important to draw the line and draw the distinction between what a consumable wearable is, which is your Fitbits and your Apple Watches, And there are certain, challenges with that technology because it is built for a consumer base. Whereas on the other hand, that medical wearable is, the data is validated, it's reliable, it's data that you can trust and use to make your own decisions.
Yeah, and you need to use that when you are basing these big decisions on like whether a new piece of equipment is going to be rolled out across the entire company on something you can trust. That's not to say, your Fitbits and products like that have been fantastic products for what they were developed for, which was to give people some, overall broad information. Yeah, so they've definitely got their place. But once you start trying to put it into the medical or clinical market, or you start making big corporate decisions based on it, I think that's where it can run into trouble. So as you can see, a little bit more about ViSafe. So we've talked about wearable sensors, and we've already told you about why ViSafe's a bit different. The key point being that it's medical grade, and we've actually won quite a lot of awards for some of the work that we've done in the health and safety industry, which you can see up on the screen. Just to, we're going to talk to you about case studies, but just to give you the key point of what we do is that we assess movement, muscle activity, and vibration exposure. So that's what the sensors do. So you can see off from the picture that's displayed on screen now, this girl's fitted up for a back and shoulder assessment. She's wearing our movement sensors that have an accelerometer, gyroscope and magnetometer in them, and then she's got her surface EMG sensors. So she's fitted up, they're assessing the erector spinae muscles on her back and the trapezius on her shoulders, and that tends to be the most common placement that we have for our sensors, because most of the companies that we deal with seem to have their injuries around shoulder and back. So that's why we've depicted that there for you. The other thing I think that's really important is that not only have you got the technology and the sensors, but the ViSafe product is supported by a team of people that are health professionals with health and safety backgrounds and things like that. So it's not about just giving you a whole lot of data, but we actually make sense and make that data turn into outcomes for your business.
Yeah, and I think what surprises some clients is that on a ViSafe assessment day, we actually have a cameraman with you as well. So the person who's doing the assessment is actually taking video of the entire day and all of the tasks that a worker would complete within that day. So it's very resource heavy, this ViSafe project.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool because when you look at it and you get the final data, it's like you can see underneath the worker's skin, because that video synchronized them with the live data that shows you whether they're straining their muscles, what their range of movement was like. And it's like suddenly being able to see under the skin. The workers love that because it's not just, you need to do this. They start understanding why they need to do it, which is pretty cool. You'd think an Australian company, coming out with this tech, we launched recently and have expanded so rapidly overseas, and you sort of wonder whether when you go into these markets like in the US and UK, whether there's somebody else like us around. But we haven't been able to find anyone else around the world that is doing exactly what we're doing, and I think that's one of the main reasons why we're just getting really big names behind us all around the world that are turning to our technology to help them in these areas. So it's a pretty exciting place to be.
One of the first things we did was we actually heard about Dorsa V through one of our suppliers. So we actually called up Dorsa V that week and organised the meeting. And really from that first meeting, we decided that we're actually going to use Dorsa V at some point and be safe. And what it actually gave us is a real true understanding of the problem that we're actually having with manual handling. So we actually were able to see that 60% of the day for our team members that were assessed was actually in a high risk muscle position. And when we look at our risk register, that's almost telling us that we're at a significant risk rather than a high risk. We could see that there was a real sort of difference there. So what that gave us is a new sort of a fresh starting point and really an eye-opening experience. So we started to work on developing the 180 initiative. And so 180 tried to bring in some elements of marketing and graphic design into health and safety, but ultimately its mission was to engage our team members. So we gave the ViSafe assessment through to our rehab company, and so our rehab company took that information and developed a warm-up program for the stores looking at that specific information. From there, we also developed a video library of different manual handling, risk mitigation stuff. We did some basic anatomy training, discomfort versus pain, and some of these sorts of things as well. So with that information, we then created a website for 180. A lot of that information propelled through using the ViSafe data. We kind of put aside our old safe work procedure method of training and developed a new online manual handling training module that referenced ViSafe's information. And what it really was a shift from telling our team members over and over again how to lift a box or how to move something. We started to move into the why. Why is it important that you actually do manual handling with the right technique?
So now that we've heard about Gareth and how he used ViSafe across the business, I think the thing I love the most when I listen to him is, he gets the data and then he integrates it into so many different areas, which is, one of the reasons why he then gets these amazing outcomes. And we'll hear a bit more about that. But maybe what we should do at this point is drill down a little bit further and show people how we present that data. And the utilities company project was a really good case study.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit of a busy slide, so let me just drill into it a little bit more. As you can see there, you've got sort of 6 main tasks that we've analysed across the day. And what was interesting about this company was that they actually thought that their spraying task was going to be one of their high-risk tasks, just because of the nature of, the shoulder elevation and the shoulder movement left to right, and also carrying a backpack. So spraying was sort of flagged as one of their high-risk tasks. When we did the analysis, the task itself actually only scored a 1 out of 8 on our risk scoring matrix. What we were able to identify is that some of the peripheral activities around the spraying task were actually higher risk, scoring a 4 out of 8. Because of the ergonomics of the truck setup, it was actually that packing and unpacking the spraying equipment was actually more high risk than the task itself.
So it was the tasks around it that were the problem.
Yeah, and we often see that. So clients will come to us and they'll have a certain hypothesis in mind, and what we end up showing is that it might not necessarily be exactly what you think, but it's the peripheral activities around that task that are actually, more of a priority to attend to. And because we do not just task analysis, but we're looking at a worker across an entire day, we can actually look at other things like revegetation task and how highly that scored on the risk scoring method. So we were able to identify that parts of that task were scoring 6s and 5s out of a possible 8, and they were much higher priority than what spraying would be. The other interesting one about this particular job was in comparing, it was we did sort of a baseline assessment, but also included a bit of a comparative test as well. And we were looking at different equipment around the hole digging, and using a Hamilton hand tool, 7 out of 8 the task was scored for high risk, which really puts you up right at the top of the risk priorities. But if we changed and we used another tool called an auger, it actually dropped it by nearly 50% down to a 4 out of 8. So we were able to validate right then and there that the auger was going to be a much better tool than the Hamilton hand tool for that particular task. That really helps an organisation in their decision making about whether to roll out a new piece of equipment and whether they're going to get ROI on that.
The thing I liked about it too is I think I heard with this particular case that there was an increase in productivity as well from that piece of equipment. So it's quite nice in some of the comparative assessments that we do, is that not only are we looking for whether there's a reduction in manual handling risk, but whether also there's a productivity benefit from a different piece of equipment over another.
Yeah, and we'll show another case study in a couple of minutes. But what I like about this is that sometimes employees are reluctant to take on a new piece of equipment, thinking that it's going to take them longer to do the job. And we've got an example a bit later on that we can delve into where this has happened, and the data is able to validate, well, actually, you've got a productivity increase if you use this piece of equipment. So we always do try and come at it from a safety perspective, but we do get these nice little add-on bonus points, I guess, by using the data to validate purchasing.
And that's how you really get the employees on board, I think, because you're showing that you've come in there, you've assessed it objectively, so you're not trying to make one outcome over another. And then when you get those benefits, the employees see this data and then they understand that it's actually, going to increase productivity as well, it really translates into people getting behind your new initiatives.
Yeah, that's it. And, we're not just coming in as part of the workshop that we do and present this data back to you in little squares of red, amber and green.
Yeah.
This sort of stuff is, there's quite a bit of science behind our scoring method, and we won't go into too much detail, but it's outlined on this slide here. We're looking at, time spent time spent in the preferred range of movement. We're looking at repetitions. We're looking at sustained postures. And in this example, we're doing that across the back as well as the left and right shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
When we do present this in a workshop, there's often 20 or 30 people in that workshop, in that room.
Mm.
And that's everyone from a CFO to a safety manager to a line manager, right down to the frontline staff who actually, volunteered for the assessment. And what we see is that the presentation of the data linked with the video that we've captured is really engaging, and
Yep.
it really sort of highlights, oh, I get it. That we just see aha moments happening all the time, I guess.
Yeah, it's great.
From the particular presentation of the data.
So the manual handling code is behind some of the sort of scoring system that we use. But as you said, it's probably not worth going into detail now. But if people have got more questions about how we do that scoring, we'd be happy to discuss that after the webinar. But let's now have a listen to Gareth again and start hearing from him about what some of the outcomes and benefits were of integrating and doing his ViSafe assessment. Because we heard last time about how he integrated that across the business, and now let's have a look at what the benefits are they're getting. Yeah.
What ViSafe gave us was that credibility. So we actually truly understood the problem, and we're able to say this is why it's important that we do each step in a safe manner. So some things might seem trivial, so how you're cleaning a mirror, but if you actually sort of look at that from the bigger picture of that 60% of the day spent in a high risk position, you start to take away those 5% and you can start to say this is why it's important. So since the introduction of our 180 initiative out to stores, we've seen some really great improvements, primarily in our incident reductions, our severity outcome reductions, and also our engagement as well. So currently we're seeing about a 30% reduction in incidents across the retail network, and a 60% reduction in our lost time injuries. And through surveys, we're seeing a current engagement level of 8.5 out of 10 as well, which are absolutely amazing results. And historically, we just never saw an incident reduction in any 1 year. So to have had such a dramatic sort of downturn in those incidents has been really amazing. As far as ViSafe's role, I think it really was our cornerstone of that strategy and really the launching piece as well. I think we could see the incidents were really high, and we were still seeing that the incidents were increasing, and you can almost become a little bit overwhelmed by the complexity of that problem. But being able to take it down to a very sort of clear, sort of simplified problem that 60% of our day is in a high risk position, giving that information then through to our suppliers sort of set us on that journey as well, and it became quite pivotal into everything that we were actually doing. So I think 180 it definitely is. It's a manual handling spraying reduction program. That's what it is at its core. We try to almost put aside our other issues so that we can focus specifically on that as a problem. And I think without Dorsa V, we wouldn't have been able to understand the problem as well as we do. And I think also that credibility that it also gave us by being so objective also gave us a really good starting point for 180 and everything that actually happened from there as well.
So there was a couple of key points that I like when I listened to Gareth, is that, he was saying that whole feeling of being completely overwhelmed by the complexity of, all the different issues that the workers were exposed to, and that ViSafe helped simplify that for him and set priorities. So he really understood what the problem was. And it was a bit like what you were saying with that utilities case study before, that they had an idea that it might be this, but then when they looked at the data, they realised, oh, actually, it's a different issue. Plus there's some other things, and maybe we could look at scheduling of these things. And, it starts to set your priorities and make it really clear about what you've got to do. And the other point that he made, which, is pivotal, I think, is that it gives them the credibility to then get everyone across the organisation behind the initiatives that he's trying to introduce to really change the outcomes for them and reduce the injuries.
Yeah, and what I loved that he was talking about was that talk of collaboration. So talking with his suppliers and being able to get, his rehab company on board to be able to roll this data out and actually use it across the organisation. And we're going to go through another couple of quick case studies. And the first one that we'll bring up is with a large casino group, and this is where we saw some really good collaboration also. So this casino group had a very unique problem. Workers were starting, and in the 3 months of, the first 3 months of their employment, their back injury rates were going through the roof. So it's a very unique problem that they sort of didn't really have insights into why that was happening. So we were brought in to identify the risk and plan some changes. We came in, we did a baseline assessment, we made some recommendations about redesign, which they did. And then we worked and we collaborated with a physio group who was their third-party provider of their pre-employment screens. And what that third-party group did was use our data and our technology and changed the pre-employment screen so that now they were able to really identify workers who could perform specific movements that were required of that job. And the result was quite fantastical in a way, because in 2014 in Q1, they had 72 injuries. That same quarter, a year later, down to 1 injury.
That's really dramatic change, isn't it? And like you said, I think they've been able to achieve that because they didn't just get the data and go, oh, okay, let's just use this in one segment of the business. They actually looked at it across their manual handling training. They looked at it in terms of their engineering and the actual setup of the tables that the workers were on. And then they used it with the third party to make sure pre-employment was taking that data into account. It's the same sort of thing as what Gareth's done with Specialty Fashion Group, is the data has been able to infiltrate various parts of the business to get the best results.
Yeah. Gareth actually uses the words, the ViSafe is the cornerstone of what our broader strategy was. And I think that this casino group really used the data in a similar way.
Yeah.
Another case study that I love is with Woolworths, and what they were looking at, and I sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but they looked at a trolley that was potentially going to reduce back injuries in milk fridges. It's sort of a hydraulic trolley. So if you take off a crate, the trolley kicks in and pushes a crate to the top. So it sort of reduces that back flexion. Our data was able to determine that it actually reduced back flexion by over 80%, and that when workers used that trolley compared with their traditional way to stock a milk fridge, that we actually had an 87% reduction in back injuries. And along with that, so this was the case study that I mentioned, Sarah, where they had a little bit of reluctance to put the trolley in place because workers were thinking that it was going to take them more time to stock milk fridges that way. But what we actually found was that there was a 21% reduction in time for that task. And that's enough for any CFO and store manager to sign off on that trolley and roll it out across the business. We've got a productivity increase, we have a dramatic safety increase, and it's sort of a no-brainer from there.
Yeah, it's a great way to roll out, like before you do invest a large amount of money, it's a great way to do a bit of a pilot and to get the evidence that it's going to work and then use that as well to get everybody on board.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the types of assessments that we do, but a comparison assessment in a one day across one task, for us, that's a relatively simple project to do. So for a small investment, the ROI was really clear for Woolworths.
And this is an example, I guess, and that's the thing with comparative assessments. Sometimes what happens is, we do our baseline assessment for a company, and then we identify what the problems are and the priorities for them, and then we come back and say, okay, one of the risk controls would be to introduce this new piece of equipment. And then we can test this for you and show, old practice versus new practice and show them the benefits of that. But in other cases too, we have clients come to us, as they did Woolworths, where they already had the idea that they wanted to introduce this piece of equipment, but they weren't sure how much benefit and whether it was worth investing that amount of money. So the comparative assessment can come to us in two different ways. We either, develop or design the equipment change or come up with the equipment change from the baseline, or companies just come straight to us and ask us to test and show us whether it's better or not. really interesting in terms of some of the results you get, because as we've seen before, sometimes you have a preconceived idea about what's going to work, and then when you get the evidence behind it, it can challenge that, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've talked a bit about hospitality and retail, but construction's an area where we're getting a large uptake or support. This Vinci case study was actually done in the UK, and the project was a really exciting project because this is actually one of the areas where we've won a lot of awards for. And what they were actually looking at was a traditional way of laying bricks. So something as simple as laying bricks with a traditional mortarboard versus the EcoSpot board. This was going to take a fair amount of investment from the organisation if they were to adopt this. And again, with the bricklayers, they were a little bit reluctant to use the new EcoSpot. But once we got the ViSafe assessment and we showed things like the time spent with back bent over 20 degrees was reduced by up to 85%, that they had an 84% reduction in their low back muscle strain. So, and the workers could see this from looking at the data, and that their repetition of the high risk movements was also reduced by up to 70%. Again, it had a productivity measure, and we were able to show that there was a 17% increase in productivity measured in bricks per minute. So these are the sorts of outcomes that the ViSafe assessment showed. And now they've, of course, you know, rolled out that piece of equipment across the board, and the workers are really supportive of doing that because they've had this assessment and seen this data.
Yeah, and what I like about that particular stuff, so in Australia, in the construction industry, we have a real ageing workforce, from my experience. We've got brickies who are staying on into their 50s and sometimes even into their 60s.
Yeah.
So to be able to validate a piece of equipment that's going to reduce their movement and muscle activity, you know, repetition and sustain postures, that means that those guys can stay on for longer without getting injured. They're not being pushed out of the business. So we've had some really good results with buy-in from unions and buy-in from the employees themselves around, using our data to validate new pieces of equipment.
You're right. That sort of ageing workforce and, you know, the health and demographic of the workforce has definitely changed, and is one of the challenges I think safety managers come up against that they often talk to us about. So it is good to be able to offer something that can help them in that area.
Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about different case studies, and I think it's, you know, key to just summarise, I guess, and make sure it's quite clear in terms of what are the outputs that we actually do from our ViSafe projects. So baseline assessment, that's where people come to us and they say, look, we think we've got an idea that the problem is this, but we just want you to look at the worker throughout the day and come back and let us know what are the highest risks and how can we help control these or reduce the risk for injury. So that's our baseline assessment. As I said, this can then lead into sometimes us coming back with equipment suggestions that we then go and do a comparative test on, or some clients come straight to us and ask us to test 2 different ways of doing things or 2 different pieces of equipment, or 3. Some of the comparative assessments we've done have been pretty complex, like some of the mining companies and things, but really good to get the evidence behind what's going to work best. And now what we're seeing a lot of is this best practice. So once they've got a baseline, and, you know, people sometimes they're horrified to see once we go back and show them what's actually happening out there, that how bad some of the practices can be. They ask us to go back and actually collect best practice. So what does that look like? What does it look like when you're watching it on film? And then what does it actually look like in terms of when you're looking at that data? And this can be really useful manual handling training content. So as Gareth was talking about, that's the sort of thing that he's now integrated into all their manual handling training. By people being able to see under the skin and really truly know what the impact is on their muscles, like you were saying with the brickies or whatever, they might have that attitude, no, you know, I'm right, I haven't hurt myself now. But once you show them, but actually you're straining your muscles for, you know, 84% of that task, they start understanding, and then they start following the practices that you're suggesting. And by having that best practice, you can show that to them. And the My ViSafe app, which we're about to launch next month, is really exciting because it then takes it to the next level. We're going to talk a little bit more and show the group what this My ViSafe app looks like. but it allows that content to be accessible to workers on the job.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the data and the types of outputs that we can get and the results that we've had with other companies. We want to sort of delve into some of the interventions a little bit more. So once you have the data from ViSafe, what happens now? And Gareth talked about ViSafe being the foundation on which to put the building blocks for changing that behaviour. And how do you actually go about that? So what we see that ViSafe really helps with is the education piece. So not just how to do something. So what does the data tell us is the best way to do it? That's the how. But the data also tells us the why. We also make it relevant and on the job. We're not just testing workers in a simulation or getting them to do a task independent of their entire workday. We're measuring them in their real work environment. We get there at 7 when they get there at 7. We fit them up with the technology. We video them throughout the day, and they just go about their normal tasks. So you can't get much more relevant than that.
And do you know what I find interesting is some people say, oh, but don't they know that they're being filmed so they do everything right? But that is so not the truth, because when we go back and we look at some of the footage, you won't believe how quickly they forget that assessor is there. And often, we might have GoPro cameras. They forget that the cameras are there and they slip back to old habits very quickly, don't they?
Yeah, and you don't even feel the technology once it's on you. I mean, I've been in the position where I've got it on myself and thought I was doing pretty good throughout that day and ended up being slouched for 87% of the time that I was sitting. So that's as an exercise physiologist and, knowing that I'm wearing the sensors. And I think it's just, it really makes it relevant to what people do in real life on their job. We can also use the technology and the data to ensure compliance with best practice, with engaging them with the videos and what the data feed is actually showing them. And what we know is that simple, consistent, regular and portable technology can engage workers.
Yeah.
So we really think that that's a cornerstone of trying to change workers' behaviours.
Yeah, and I think the My ViSafe app takes it to that next level where those key things that you're talking about it being simple, about it being consistent and regular, it really gives us the ability to do that now. So these small little sensors, the workers just fit on. And then the other thing that's great about it is it gives us the scalability. So we do a ViSafe assessment, and yes, we're not doing it on 80,000 employees within that company, but that data is then input into the My ViSafe app. So it's got the intelligence behind the ViSafe assessment that then translate across the workforce, which is, amazing in terms of the system understands what the tasks are that they're trying to do. So they can, for instance, be, unstacking beer off a shelf or whatever it is, and they can select that task and the system will be assessing them throughout that task, and then it gives them the feedback. So they might get a flag and a warning saying 60% of that task was performed in the red zone. Now watch a best practice video again, and then they can repeat the task and they get that immediate feedback. Okay, great, I've just done it again. I watched the video, I tried to follow that, and I was able to drop my risk rating down by 30% for the manual handling risk of that task. So that's the sort of thing that makes it really accessible to people, quick, easy to use. And the other thing is, everyone's loves apps and iPhones and things like that. So the technology integrates with what people are used to using all the time and becomes a bit of a talking point. And like I said, with traditional ways of dealing with manual handling, the guys aren't on the job talking about manual handling risk and doing it the right way, but suddenly you use wearable tech and you've got your iPhone app and people start talking about it, and it becomes
like a bit of a competitive thing.
Exactly.
Between workers. Like, what was your profile today? Oh, you're at 50% in the red. I'm only at 30.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes that engaging kind of, it's nearly gamifying it in a way.
Yep. And the thing is, we know it works too. So as I said, one of the differentiators between what we do and some, consumer wearable products is that we've actually run a randomized controlled trial. Now, these people had back injuries, and it's not about, these sensors having to be worn every day of their life on their job. We were able to prove in this clinical trial that we ran in Australia that patients were wearing the product just once or twice a week for 8 weeks. And when we went back and measured them again at 52 weeks, those people that had already had back injuries, they still had a 45% reduction in pain and a 73% improvement in function compared to when they started at baseline. So it does work. The behaviour modification, making it accessible, giving people the direct feedback when they're out in their everyday activities does work. And now with the My ViSafe app, they're going to have the ability to be able to do that.
Well, it's sort of like, we've come from that sporting environment, and we've got a lot of, health professionals in our company that have worked with these athletes. And really what we've done with working with athletes and giving them immediate feedback, visual feedback, using technology to engage them, that's exactly what we're doing over here in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So we're really just translating what we've learned in the sporting environment and bringing it across to, a broader scale where it's really being used for some fantastic outcomes.
Yeah, and that's why I think we're seeing such a massive uptake in this area, because it's got the ability to be used across the business and to really make some dramatic changes to an area that was looking for some change, I guess. And, we've talked about this through all our case studies, but I think the ones that make it the biggest success are the ones that are able to roll it out across the business. So it becomes this common language for, they start integrating the data into return to work. They start looking at it pre-employments. They're able to use the ViSafe data to redesign tasks and start reducing the risk. It's just a way of connecting everybody on the same page, making it objective, making it simple, and using that data to get the best outcomes and improve the whole safety culture across the business.
Yeah, it really provides that language, that common language that all of the different parties can use in order to, improve safety outcomes. And what I like is that we're getting a lot of great investment from the insurance companies. They're really buying into what we're doing. They're loving the intervention, the innovation of it all, and they're really happy to support a lot of the initiatives that we're doing with their clients.
Yeah, same with the rehab providers, that they can see that something like this technology can support their role as well. So as you said, insurers, corporates, rehab providers, they're all quite supportive of how technology can improve outcomes.
Yeah, they all want data.
Well, I think that's a wrap from us. We might open to questions. We've had a couple of questions come through, so we'll just finish off in the last couple of minutes for the webinar. And Landell, you might want to have a chat about the union groups. One of the questions that's come through is, have we had any issues with unions given that technologies are monitoring workers throughout the day?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think I alluded to it a little bit before when we were talking about the construction industry. My experience is that this is actually a really great way to engage the unions. I had an instance with a logistics company where they thought it was going to be a problem, monitoring workers, and maybe the data is being used for a not so positive effect or outcome. But by engaging the union delegate early in that process, we were able to show them that this is actually a really fantastic program for an employee. We're aiming to improve safety, we're aiming to reduce injuries, therefore we're aiming to look after employees better, keep them at work for longer. That's where they stay well. And I can totally understand the question, but we've had some really good engagement from the union so far.
Yeah, I've had that come up with in the mining industry and warehousing as well, fairly unionised environments, and again, same sort of thing. People initially are a bit nervous about it, thinking it could be a problem.
It's new. Yeah, exactly. You're going to get those hesitations, but it's just about us working with the safety managers, communicating that properly and appropriately, and
I think it gets them on board more than, exactly. Absolutely. So it's great. The other question that we've had is, can you use the technology on other body parts? Because we tend to, because the predominant injuries that we in the industries that we look after tend to be back and shoulder and as we showed in the photo, the girl was fitted up for a back and shoulder assessment. But we have been used in other areas. So depending on what the client's issues are, sometimes we've done office-based environments, so we're looking at the neck or forearm, wrist movements and things like that as well. So the technology has the potential to be used on other body parts. However, we tend to have had most of the work in back and shoulder, I guess, because that's the nature of where the injuries are coming up.
Yeah, most companies come with us prepared for that first meeting to tell us where their injuries are, and it's quite alarming, you know, how often it is that back and shoulder injuries are the number 1 and number 2 places on that data. But a little bit more, we're seeing knees and wrists come into it. We've started a project with a sort of a roadside assistance company who are looking at their knees as well as their backs and shoulders. So yeah, we definitely have some capability to work across different body parts.
Great. Well, I think that we've just about used our time slot for this webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you found it interesting. Both myself and Landell would love to hear from you if you have further questions about what we've presented today, or just want to have a chat to us about some of the issues that you're having in your own organisation and see how wearable technology may be able to assist you.